I stared at the door to the spare bedroom again, my hand resting on the frame. The pale yellow paint I had chosen years ago still looked fresh, and the mobile with tiny stars and moons still hung from the ceiling, spinning slightly in the draft. For 7 years, that room had been waiting. For 7 years, I had been waiting, and it was still empty. When Ethan and I first moved into this house, I used to imagine how it would feel to stand here, holding our baby, maybe humming softly while the room smelled of warm milk and baby lotion. I imagined tiny clothes folded neatly in drawers, a crib pushed against the wall, and laughter echoing down the hallway. Instead, it was just me and silence. We had tried everything. At first, I thought pregnancy would just happen the way it does for everyone else. You stop the pills, you wait a month, and life changes forever. That's what I believed. But months passed, then a year, then two. I kept telling myself maybe I was too stressed, maybe it just wasn't the right time, maybe next month. Every single negative test was like a little punch in my chest. When we finally went to the doctor, I thought we'd hear something simple, something fixable. I thought it would be a matter of vitamins or timing. Instead, I sat there in a sterile white room while a doctor explained, with clinical detachment, that my chances of conceiving naturally were extremely low. It felt like he was talking about someone else's life, not mine. My ears buzzed as the words, extremely low, sank in. We talked about options, IVF, hormone therapy, surgery. It all sounded hopeful, scientific, like something from a miracle story online. And for a while, I believed it would save us. I believed it would give us what we had dreamed of since the day we bought this house. So I signed up, eager and terrified at the same time. Nothing could have prepared me for what IVF would do to my body and my heart. I gave myself hormone shots every morning and every night, tiny needles sliding into already bruised skin. I carried the dull ache of swollen ovaries everywhere I went. I had blood drawn, so often I could barely find a vein that wasn't sore. I tracked my body temperature like it was a stock market graph. And still nothing. Every failed cycle crushed me a little more. Each time the phone rang with the nurse's polite, sorry voice, I felt something inside me collapse. I tried to smile when Ethan held me and whispered, "We'll try again, we'll keep trying." But inside I felt broken and ashamed. I started to feel like I was letting him down, like he had married someone defective. I hated that thought. I hated myself for even thinking it, but late at night, when he was asleep, I would lie awake and wonder if he regretted choosing me. The last cycle was the worst. I remember sitting on the cold bathroom floor, my hand shaking as I stared at yet another single line on the test. I didn't even cry at first. I just sat there, numb, trying to breathe. Then it hit me all at once, like a wave I couldn't escape, and I sobbed until my throat hurt. When Ethan found me, I tried to hide the test behind my back, as if keeping it out of sight would erase the truth. He sat down next to me, pulled the test from my hand, and hugged me so tightly it almost hurt. "Rachel," he said, his voice low and steady, "you can't keep doing this to yourself. We have to stop." But I shook my head and whispered, "I can't stop. Not yet. I can't give up on this." He closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against mine. "I don't want to lose you to this," he said quietly. "You're the person I love, not the dream of a baby. If this is hurting you more than it's helping, we need to think about what we're doing." I knew he was right, but I couldn't let go. Every story I had ever told myself about my life included a baby that looked like us. The thought of giving that up felt like giving up on us, on everything we had built. So we stayed in this painful cycle, me pushing my body past its limits, him watching helplessly as I did it. The silence between us grew heavier with every failed attempt. Ethan started avoiding conversations about children, and I stopped mentioning appointments or treatments. We still loved each other, of that I was sure, but the air between us was thick with things we didn't say. Meals passed quietly, nights ended with quick kisses instead of long talks, and the spare bedroom stayed exactly as it was, untouched, waiting. Sometimes I would stand in that room at night, the glow of the streetlight casting shadows on the bare crib mattress we'd bought years ago. I would rest my hand on the railing and whisper, "Please, just one chance." But no one answered. There was only the soft creak of the house settling, and the echo of my own voice fading into the stillness. It's strange how easily your mind travels back when life feels heavy. That night, lying awake with swollen eyes and an aching heart, I found myself thinking about the day I first met Ethan. It wasn't a storybook moment, just a casual barbecue one of my colleagues hosted. But from the moment I saw him across the yard, standing there awkwardly with a paper plate full of food he clearly didn't know anyone well enough to eat with, I felt something. We ended up at the same table, laughing at how neither of us knew most of the guests. He had this quiet humor, the kind that sneaks up on you instead of demanding attention. We talked about everything, favorite books, movies, the music we grew up with. He told me about his job as a junior software engineer and how he liked solving problems most people found boring. I admitted I loved teaching little kids because they made every day unpredictable in the best possible way. By the end of the night, we were exchanging phone numbers and pretending it was no big deal, even though my stomach fluttered the whole drive home. We started dating quickly, almost effortlessly. There was never that complicated push and pull some couples have. With Ethan, it was easy, comfortable. He treated me like I mattered, not because of what I did for him, but because of who I was. After years of watching friends go through messy breakups and on-again, off-again drama, it felt like I had stumbled onto something rare, something solid. A year later, he proposed. It wasn't some extravagant, Instagram-worthy event. He asked me while we were hiking a quiet trail near Mount Hood, just the two of us and the sound of wind through the trees. He pulled out a simple silver ring, hand shaking, and whispered, "I don't ever want to do life without you." I said yes before he even finished the question. We married in a small ceremony, just family and a handful of close friends. There wasn't much money back then. Ethan was still paying off student loans, and I had just started my teaching career, but we didn't care. We made do with what we had, and we were happy. When we bought our little 2-bedroom house in Beaverton a couple of years later, it felt like planting roots. We painted the kitchen a warm yellow, picked out furniture piece by piece, and laughed at how many things we didn't know about homeownership. But the best part of that house was the extra bedroom. From the very first day, we called it the baby's room. We didn't even try for kids at first. We wanted to enjoy being newlyweds, to travel a little, to save some money. But still, we set up that room, soft yellow walls, a white crib we got on sale, a tiny bookshelf. I remember standing in that doorway one evening, Ethan wrapping his arms around me from behind, saying, "Someday we'll bring them home to this." Someday. For years, I carried that picture in my heart, Ethan holding a baby that had his eyes and my smile. I thought it was inevitable, like sunrise after night. And maybe that's why our struggle cut so deeply later. Because we weren't just losing a dream, we were losing something we had already lived in our minds 100 times over. Still, thinking back to those early years helped me breathe on the nights when disappointment felt too heavy. I reminded myself that Ethan and I weren't built on the idea of children alone. We were built on respect, on laughter, on the kind of quiet love that holds when life doesn't go the way you planned, and somehow, that gave me just enough strength to keep moving, even when everything felt uncertain. After years of hoping and trying, something inside me began to shift. It didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like water wearing down stone. At first, I still believed every failed cycle was just a delay, a test of patience. But as the months bled into years, I started waking up with a heavy, sinking feeling before I even reached for the test. I would stare at that single line and feel nothing, and then the numbness would break, leaving me in tears I couldn't control. The doctor said we should take a break. My body had been through too much, the constant injections, the medications, the procedures. He said stress alone could sabotage everything, that rest was as important as treatment. But how do you rest when your life feels like it's on pause? How do you relax when every reminder, friends announcing pregnancies, baby showers, even a stroller passing by in the grocery store, feels like a personal failure? Ethan tried to be supportive. He cooked dinner when I was too tired to move, held me when I broke down, and stayed silent when words wouldn't help. But silence became our new language. He stopped asking how I felt, maybe afraid of the answer. I stopped talking about appointments and lab results, afraid of watching hope drain from his face again. We were still partners, but it felt like we were walking side by side in separate worlds. I started avoiding friends with kids. It wasn't their fault, but I couldn't look at their lives without feeling hollow. I'd scroll past baby pictures online, pretending it didn't sting, but the ache stayed with me day and night. I even stopped stepping into the yellow room. Dust settled on the mobile, and the crib became just another piece of furniture, a painful reminder of what wasn't happening. One night, Ethan suggested adoption again. It wasn't the first time he'd mentioned it, but I'd always shut it down before. It wouldn't be the same, I used to say, convinced a child had to share our blood to feel like ours. But that night, something inside me cracked. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe desperation. I didn't snap at him like before. I just asked, "Do you think we could really do it? Raise someone else's child like our own?" He looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in months. "Rachel," he said quietly, "any child we raise together will be ours. Blood doesn't change that. Love does." I didn't answer right away. That old dream of having a baby who looked like Ethan, who shared my smile or his eyes, still clung to me. But I couldn't deny the truth. I was tired. Tired of needles, tired of pills, tired of crying in the bathroom every month. Maybe adoption wasn't a compromise. Maybe it was a different kind of miracle. Still, I wasn't ready to admit that out loud, not yet. So I kept it to myself and started small. I began looking at adoption websites when Ethan wasn't home, scrolling through profiles of children waiting for families. At first, it felt mechanical, like browsing something far removed from reality. But as I read their little bios, likes, dislikes, favorite colors, dreams of a mom and dad, something shifted again. I found myself wondering about them, imagining what it might be like to meet them, to know them, to be theirs. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was movement. I was no longer standing still in grief. Some part of me was reaching for hope again, even if I didn't fully understand what kind of hope it was. And for the first time in years, I thought maybe, just maybe, there could still be a family waiting for us out there, just not in the way I'd originally imagined. One afternoon, during my lunch break at school, I sat at my desk with a cup of lukewarm coffee. Scrolling through emails, I barely had the energy to read. My students were at recess, the classroom was quiet, and I just wanted to shut my brain off for a few minutes. Somehow, instead of closing the laptop like I normally would, I opened the adoption website I'd been visiting in secret. Most of the time, I scrolled quickly. I read little bios, saw smiling faces, then clicked away because I couldn't feel anything but distance. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was that none of them felt like ours. Until I saw him. His name was Liam Parker, 6 years old. Brown hair that stuck up a little on one side like it never quite behaved. Gray-green eyes that stared straight into the camera with this mix of curiosity and wariness, like he didn't know whether to trust the person taking the photo. And then I noticed the small scar near his chin, subtle but visible, just like the one Ethan had gotten as a kid falling off his bike. I froze. My heart pounded like I'd run up the stairs too fast. He didn't just resemble Ethan. He looked like someone had taken my husband's childhood picture and aged it slightly. The same eyes, the same stubborn set of the jaw, even the same messy hair. I clicked on his profile, reading every line like it was the most important thing I'd ever see. He liked drawing airplanes and building things out of Legos. He loved peanut butter sandwiches but hated tomatoes. He wanted to be a pilot or a superhero, whichever comes first. Something inside me broke open in that moment, something I didn't even know was still locked. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was looking at someone else's child. I felt like I was looking at our child. I called the adoption agency before I could talk myself out of it. The woman on the other end was warm, professional, and kind. She explained that Liam was healthy, developmentally on track, and had been in foster care for nearly 2 years. "He's a great kid," she said. "A little cautious at first, but very bright." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at my phone. I could feel tears pressing at the back of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall yet. I needed to tell Ethan. That evening, I stood in the kitchen, twisting my wedding ring nervously as I showed him the profile on my phone. "He looks like you," I said quietly, bracing for him to remind me how many times I'd rejected the idea of adoption. But Ethan just stared at the picture for a long time, his face unreadable, before finally whispering, "He really does." Then he looked at me, something hopeful flickering in his eyes for the first time in months. "Are you sure about this? Because last time we talked about adoption—" "I know," I cut him off gently. "But this feels different. I don't know how to explain it. I just feel like he's supposed to be with us." Ethan smiled faintly and nodded. "Okay," he said. "Then let's do it." We applied that week. The agency sent us forms, checklists, and a schedule for mandatory parenting classes. It was overwhelming: background checks, financial reviews, home visits. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were moving towards something instead of running in circles. Every night, after the paperwork and planning were done, I'd look at Liam's picture one more time before bed. I'd imagine him sitting in the empty yellow room, his drawings taped to the wall, his voice echoing through the hallway. For the first time in so long, hope didn't feel like a cruel trick. It felt real, like maybe life was finally about to change. As we moved forward with the adoption process, Ethan grew quieter than usual. He did everything that needed to be done, filled out forms, attended classes, talked with social workers. But there was a heaviness to him I couldn't ignore. One night, after another long day of paperwork and checklists, I finally asked, "What's going on?" "You seem somewhere else." He hesitated, staring at the cup of tea in his hands. "There's something I never really told you," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I sat down next to him, waiting. "You know my childhood wasn't great," he began. "You know my mom had a drinking problem, that there were men who came and went. But what I never told you is how close I came to ending up in foster care." He paused, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his cup. "I had a sister, Vicky. She was 2 years older than me, and for a long time she was my whole world. She took care of me when Mom was passed out, made sure I ate, kept me out of trouble. She used to tell me bedtime stories she made up on the spot. Wild, funny things about a boy named Max who built a rocket out of tin cans and flew to the moon. She was amazing." I reached out and put my hand on his. He didn't look up, just kept talking. "One night when I was about 6, social services showed up. Someone had called about neglect. I remember the sound of their knock. It was so loud, like it shook the walls. They talked to Mom, then to us, and the next thing I knew, we were being split up. I begged them not to take her, but they said she needed to go to a different placement, that it was better for her. I promised her I'd find her, that I wouldn't let them keep us apart, but they took her anyway. And I stayed because Mom swore she'd get it together if they let me stay. And they did, but she didn't get it together. Not really. And I never saw Vicky again." His voice cracked on the last word. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I stayed quiet, letting him finish. "For years I tried to find her. I checked records, asked around, even paid for one of those people finder services. Nothing. It's like she disappeared. And all this time, I've carried that promise I couldn't keep. I told her we'd always be together, and then I failed her. I think about it more than I want to admit, especially now." I squeezed his hand. "Ethan, you were 6. That wasn't your fault." "I know," he said quickly, but his shoulders slumped. "It still feels like it was. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't keep us together. And now, looking at Liam, I keep thinking about what it means to really be there for someone who needs you. If we bring him home, I don't want to just be a guy who signed some papers and said the right things. I want to be the kind of father who never lets him wonder if he's wanted or safe. I want to be the man I couldn't be back then." My heart ached for him. I had known Ethan carried scars from his childhood, but I hadn't understood how deep they went. Suddenly, so much about him made sense. His fierce loyalty, his carefulness with money, the way he always double-checked that doors were locked at night. He had spent his whole life trying to create safety because he hadn't grown up with any. "You are that man," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been that man since the day I met you. And Liam, he's going to know that. He's going to feel it every single day." Ethan finally looked at me, eyes glassy but steady. I want to get this right, Rachel. I don't want him to ever feel like he's an afterthought." "He won't," I said firmly. "He's already ours in every way that matters. And when he's here, we're going to show him that every single day." For the first time in weeks, Ethan smiled, not the quick, polite smile he gave strangers, but a real one that reached his eyes. "I think you're right," he whispered. We sat there in silence for a while, holding hands, both of us staring at the same invisible picture. Liam, in that little yellow room, safe and happy. For Ethan, it was more than just adoption. It was healing a wound that had been open since childhood. And for me, it was the first time I truly understood that family isn't always about who shares your blood. Sometimes it's about who shares your heart and the promises you keep when life gives you another chance. The day we were scheduled to meet Liam, I woke before sunrise, nerves buzzing through me like electricity. I had laid out my clothes the night before, nothing too formal, nothing too casual. Just something that said, "I'm safe, I'm kind, you can trust me." Ethan was already in the kitchen when I came down, dressed and quiet, holding a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. "You ready?" I asked. He gave me a small smile. "As I'll ever be." The drive to the foster center was silent at first. I kept glancing at Ethan, noticing the way his hands tightened on the steering wheel. I knew he was thinking about his sister, about all the promises he had once made and couldn't keep. I reached over and placed my hand on his, squeezing lightly until he looked at me. "We're doing this together," I whispered. "You're not alone anymore." The building itself was cheerful enough, a mural of animals painted on the front, a playground to the side. But there was still something heavy about it. It held too many stories of kids who had lost more than any child should ever lose. A social worker named Karen greeted us with a warm smile, walking us down a hallway decorated with construction paper art and family photos of successful adoptions. "He's excited to meet you," she said as we reached a brightly lit playroom. And there he was. Liam stood near a shelf of toys, his small hands clutching a plastic airplane. He looked up when we entered, eyes cautious, like a deer unsure whether to run. For a moment, none of us spoke. I couldn't stop staring, those gray-green eyes, that stubborn chin. He really did look like Ethan. It was like looking at a living piece of fate. "Hi, Liam," I said softly, crouching down to his level. "I'm Rachel, and this is Ethan." He glanced at Ethan, then back at me. "You're the people who might be my new parents?" His voice was quiet, uncertain, but there was something brave in it. "Yes," I said, my throat tightening. "If you want us to be." Liam tilted his head, studying us like he was memorizing our faces. Then he held up the toy airplane. "I like planes," he said, almost as if it were a test. Ethan smiled, kneeling next to me. "Me too. When I was your age, I wanted to build real ones someday." Liam's eyes brightened just slightly. "Did you?" "No," Ethan said with a small laugh. "I work with computers now, but I still think airplanes are cool." That earned us the tiniest smile, a quick flash of dimples before he tucked it away like he wasn't sure he should let us see it. I wanted to hug him right then, to scoop him into my arms and promise he would never have to feel unsure again. But I stayed still, letting him take the lead. Karen encouraged us to sit at one of the small tables, where Liam pulled out crayons and began drawing. He stayed mostly quiet, glancing up every now and then as if checking to see if we were still there. Ethan watched him with a softness I'd never seen before, like every wall he'd ever built was slowly crumbling. After a while, Liam touched the chain around his neck and lifted something small and shiny, a tiny red airplane, handmade from some kind of metal scrap. "My old foster, Dad, gave me this," he said, his fingers brushing over it like it was made of gold. He said it's for when I finally get to fly somewhere safe. Ethan swallowed hard, eyes glistening, and whispered, "That's a good thing to keep." Liam looked at us again, his little voice steady this time. "Are you nice?" The question pierced me. I leaned forward, my eyes meeting his. "We're going to do our best to be everything you need. We're not perfect, but we promise to love you and keep you safe. Always." For a long moment, Liam just stared at me, and then, slowly, he scooted his chair closer, nudging his drawing toward me. "This is us," he said quietly. I looked down. He had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands. One with long hair, one taller with glasses, and one small figure with a bright red airplane in his other hand. That was it. I felt the tears come, hot and fast, and I didn't even try to stop them. Ethan placed a hand on my back, his own face wet, and whispered, "We found him, Rachel. We really found him." When it was time to leave, Liam didn't ask when we'd be back. He just said, "See you soon," as if it was already decided. And in my heart, I knew he was already ours. The day Liam came home for good, the house felt different before we even opened the door. I had spent the entire morning cleaning, fluffing pillows, and rechecking the little yellow room that had been empty for so long. Now it wasn't empty anymore. His clothes were folded in drawers, his drawings from the foster center were taped on the wall, and the crib we once bought for someday had been replaced with a twin bed covered in an airplane print comforter. When Ethan carried Liam's duffel bag through the doorway, Liam stood just inside the living room, clutching his tiny airplane necklace. His eyes moved from one corner to the next like he was memorizing every inch. "This is really my house?" he asked quietly. I crouched down beside him. "Yes," I whispered. "This is your home. You're safe here, Liam." He nodded, almost shy, and then walked straight to the yellow room. He sat on the edge of the bed, bouncing once, then smiling at the sound of the springs. "It's soft," he said. "Softer than my old bed." Ethan stood in the doorway, watching with an expression I'll never forget, relief, pride, and something deeper, like a part of him he had been holding shut for years had finally opened. I reached for his hand and squeezed it. This wasn't just Liam's new home. It was Ethan's healing too. The first few days were quiet but steady. Liam kept close to us, never wandering far, like he was testing the waters of trust. We cooked dinners together, Ethan showing him how to stir pancake batter without spilling it everywhere. Liam showing us how to make peanut butter sandwiches the right way, extra thick, no crust. He laughed for the first time on the 3rd day when Ethan accidentally dropped a spoonful of batter on the floor. It was small, quick, but it lit up the whole kitchen. That night, after Liam went to bed, I stood in the hallway watching him sleep. His little chest rose and fell, his tiny fingers clutching that red airplane like it was a lifeline. I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had believed motherhood meant carrying a child in my own body. But looking at him, I realized it wasn't biology that made this moment so powerful. It was love, the choice to love, to stay, to protect. Ethan joined me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "I keep thinking about Vicky," he whispered. "If she could see me now, if she could see this family, she'd be proud," I said softly. "You kept your promise, Ethan. Maybe not the way you thought, but you did." He kissed my forehead, and for the first time in years, I saw peace in his eyes. The next morning, Liam woke up early and ran straight to the backyard with his toy airplane. He stood there in his pajamas, holding it high and shouting, "I'm flying!" His laughter echoed through the yard, filling every space that had once been silent. Ethan stepped outside, standing beside me on the porch, and we watched together as Liam spun in circles, his airplane slicing through the cool Oregon air. I reached for Ethan's hand again. "We're really parents now," I whispered. He smiled, eyes never leaving Liam. "Yeah, and it feels right." I thought back to all those years of heartbreak, the tests, the treatments, the sleepless nights, wondering if I had failed at life's simplest promise. And now here we were, not with the family we expected, but with the family we were meant to have. Sometimes life doesn't give you what you want in the way you want it. Sometimes it gives you something better, something you didn't even know you needed until it was standing in your backyard with a toy airplane and a smile that could melt every scar you ever carried. And in that moment, I knew the waiting had been worth it, every single second of it.